Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, what's taking the states so long to catch up to the rest of the civilized world and dip the chip? Well, turns out it's pretty complicated. We'll explain. Plus, why securing a hospital is way more than just being HIPAA compliant. A great batch of your questions, our answers, a rockin' roundup, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi, everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 255 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. We stream this episode live on February 25th, 2016. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, DigitalOcean, Ting, and IX Systems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. Oh, our live stream, that's powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. You should go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hello, Mr. World Traveler. If my spider sense was correct, I had a tingling that Alan Jude was on the West Coast recently. Didn't you just get back from a FreeBSD storage summit?
Yep.
So you, Alan, are now getting down to the ninja level travel where you're like ninja traveling in between shows.
Yeah.
And so
I managed that.
I'm guessing that if people are curious, they could probably tune into this week's BSD now because I bet there was about 55 minutes of coverage.
I think it was more like 51, but sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so I sort of
set the expectations too high.
Now, because Alan Jude doesn't sleep. I don't know if you guys knew that, but Alan Jude doesn't sleep. He's also going to be traveling again very soon. So for that reason, we've decided to record a double episode next week. So we will be recording 226 and 227, or I'm sorry, 256 and 257 next Thursday. So go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. Also, that means we really need questions sent in because otherwise we won't have enough feedback. So please do email your questions, your ideas, your war stories, all of that to techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com or use the contact link. I'm putting out the plea now because we really want them so that way we can have great ones to choose from. And so that means we need a whole bunch. Speaking of a whole bunch, we got a whole bunch of news to get into today. And I actually hadn't heard about the great EMV fake out. What's this about? No chip for you, Alan, or probably for me.
Yeah, for you specifically, yes.
Tell me about this.
So now most banks have issued customers more secure chip-based credit cards, or if you haven't got one yet, when your card expires, you're definitely going to get a new one. And with the rash of people getting their cards replaced for not because it expired reasons, most people now have a chip-based credit card. And most retailers now have card terminals in their checkout lanes that can handle, dipping the chip as opposed to swiping the stripe.
That's cute.
Yeah, I wasn't sure when Krebs wrote that, but anyway. But how many people have been to a retailer and ended up swiping their card even though it has chip and the terminal has chip? Apparently this happens a lot. I've even seen some where you put this little piece of paper in between your card and the reader so that it won't it sort of fail the chip and let you swipe.
Oh, I have seen that actually. I wonder what's going on with my card. I got a letter saying you have received your chip and PIN card, but I haven't gotten the card.
Well, usually you get the card and then a week later you get the PIN number on a different thing and you only got one of the two, right?
Yeah.
You should definitely call. Because they'll have to just start it all over again. Also, I don't know, check your mail and see if it's fell somewhere.
Yeah. So I have seen this workaround happening.
Yeah. So there's that work. There's somewhere around where they're just like, please swipe. And then there's somewhere they're like, yes, it's this little piece of paper to make the reader not work. And I'm like, well, that's really fishy. But say comparatively few retailers actually allow chip transactions. Most of them are still asking customers to swipe the stripe instead of dip the chip. I'm having trouble getting over saying that.
Dip the chip, Alan.
Never heard it called that here in Canada. Most times you insert the card from the bottom of the machine. There's only a couple where you actually dip it from the top.
Leave it to us Americans to come up with a food analogy for something like this.
Yeah,
so.
I get that, yes. This post will examine what's going on here and why so many merchants are holding out on chips. Just not going to read what's written there.
There you go.
So Visa's CEO on a recent earnings call said that about 750,000 locations, which represents about 17% of the U.S. face-to-face card accepting merchants, are now enabled to handle chip and PIN transactions, or chip-based transactions. In the U.S., most of it's still chip and signature, not chip and PIN, which is just strange. But anyway, which is also called EMV. Viewed another way, that means that U.S. customers currently can expect to find chip cards accepted at checkout lines in fewer than 1 in 5 brick and mortar merchants. This leaves the question of why so many retailers are not using the chip. Sorry, it said trailers, not retailers.
Got to fix them notes.
Yeah. So in Canada and the EU, almost every transaction is chip and PIN.
Right.
Like, I don't remember the last time I didn't have to use a PIN.
Right. Okay.
Except for when I used like my PayWave to pay for something under $50 without.
Yeah. For me, the only time I use my PIN is if it's a debit transaction, and if it's a credit transaction, I always sign.
Yeah. So I think part of the reason why adoption was so much easier and faster in Canada is almost everybody used debit cards rather than credit cards for most things, like as even grocery store and so on. And so was already used to swipe the card, type in the PIN.
Yeah,
so
okay.
insert the card while you type in the PIN was really no different.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So the new MasterCard and Visa rules went into effect on October 1st of 2015. And basically they say that merchants are on the hook to pay 100% of the cost of any fraud associated with transactions in which the customer presented a chip-based card but was either not asked to use the chip or was asked to swipe instead. So if you have a chip-based card and you go to a merchant and they don't use the chip, the merchant is on the hook if it was a stolen credit card.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a stick and carrot approach there, isn't it?
Well, this one was definitely, the merchants will upgrade and support chip, or they will be responsible for all the losses Visas and the banks usually absorb for them. Although, honestly, the merchants normally take most of the brunt of the fraud anyway. So I don't know if it was quite as much of a stick as they make it sound to be.
Okay.
As a merchant, I've won a chargeback once in 25 times or something like that. It's pretty rare. Anyway, so the chips hold encrypted cardholder data and are far more expensive and difficult for card thieves to clone. Whereas, the swipe card, you've seen people just reprogram gift cards and so on, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, they say some merchants, particularly larger ones, want to turn the often painful experience of training their customers on how to use chip cards and terminals into someone else's problem. So each store is kind of waiting until the customers know how to do it because they've gone through the pain at some other store. But that doesn't really help if none of the stores switch over, right?
That is, so they're waiting for the other guy to spend the money to do the job.
Well, or it's not even so much spend the money as risk, the customers being all grumpy because it's like, what, the machine, you're changing how the machine works? I don't know, how many grandmas are going to have troubles with the chip and
I see
PIN
what you're
machine?
saying. Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. Right.
And then those like, well, I'm not shopping there anymore because it's too hard to pay.
So they're waiting until it becomes more normalized with consumers before they pull the trigger. But of course, if nobody does that,
then that's never going to happen. Yeah. They say that they see chip cards as just slowing down lines and chose to wait until customers learn to do it and do it quickly at someone else's store. Which I don't know. Like, I don't know how much slower it can be, right? If you're not using a PIN and you still have to sign the piece of paper. So instead of swiping, you stick the card in and you wait a couple seconds and then the thing comes out and you sign it. And I don't understand how it can be slower. It's like, how hard is it to put a card in a slot? You do it at an ATM all the time.
Yeah. It's, Alan, I am always amazed at how slow people are at this process, especially those of you out there, the precious one, those of you out there that write checks in the grocery stand checkout. You know what I do when I write a check? When I'm like 3 carts back, I start filling out the check. Well, I'm at Safeway, and today's this date, and I know I'm going to approve it, so maybe I'll even sign it. And then they just have to tell me the amount. Boom, boom, here's your check. Why doesn't everybody do that? It is amazing, Alan. When I have been, for the years now that I have been shopping for myself in grocery stores, every time I'm in line, get stuck behind people who have no idea what they're doing, even though they look like they're 40 years older than I am, or at least have been to the grocery store multiple times. They still can't figure it out. It's horrible, Alan. So that's got to be, and you know what? They know that's one of the most frustrating processes about going to the grocery store.
What's odd is, I don't know here, but I never see people pay with a check. Yeah, it's very, very rare. I don't even think most of the stores would do it here anymore.
It's considered a little bad form, I think, here. But
I remember when I was younger, there was a little thing, like this plastic thing for you to write the check on. But those are all gone now. Like, we don't. really.
And, people
do
are
that much
writing on a piece of paper like dead tree. They're writing on there.
Well, yeah, I know what a check is.
No,
Like,
I know, but it's like
I mean,
it's
I
amazing.
don't see that at grocery stores anymore.
It's because it's barbaric at grocery stores because you slow the whole line down.
Well, it's not just that. It's just
You know what is
the
genuinely
stores don't like it because it's like, well, maybe we'll get paid.
they can run it through a machine now. But you know what genuinely is pretty damn quick, surprisingly quick, is the Apple Pay. I was experimenting with that, and I was like, so is this paid? I'm like, okay.
So yeah, my credit cards have that built in now here. And
Right,
I use it pretty often, but it's only good for up to $50.
Well, that's not bad though. You go getting some.
So it works great at the coffee shop, right? The Starbucks or the Tim Hortons or whatever, that type of transaction, or even gas, tap, go, right? But obviously at the grocery store, I spend more than that.
Yeah. So it's been very. I've wondered. It's been very slow
Yes, I
adoption.
keep hearing these complaints about the machines being slow. I don't know if the machines down there are just not as good, or if you guys have bad internet connections.
Well, there's a case of that too. Everybody has a mixed bag of how they connect back. Most of them aren't. Almost nobody's on dial-up anymore, but some of them are. And I think what happened really, Alan, is in some cases a commercial company comes in and says, "We're going to sell you an end-to-end solution for your point of sales." They sell them on that system like back in '98. And then, or 95 or something like that. And then, it's in their interest to continue to have them use that system as long as possible because there's a monthly contract there and they're just milking it. And so a lot of these systems are like, people jumped on them and grabbed them when debit cards and all that were pretty popular, and then they just really haven't upgraded them. And now some of them are upgrading because they have to and because mobile payments are coming around, but it's such a mixed bag still.
I do every once in a while encounter a place where they still it's dialing up in order to submit the credit card.
You see that at some like those third-party ATMs sometimes too.
I'm not seeing that there, but yes, obviously if it dials up, it's going to be terribly slow because it's a modem connection, but mostly it's that you're waiting while it gets a dial tone, dials, answers,
does the handshake,
does the carrier handshake, etc. But I don't know, like the phone company here sells a low speed DSL. It's like 128 kilobits or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's a cheap DSL connection specifically for the stores to have their terminals.
You know what I find in the slightly more affluent areas of Washington is a lot of iPads in Square or mobile devices in Square, coffee shops and restaurants. Basically now,
I guess if it's a small like mom and pop type place, that maybe.
Yeah, like several new restaurants.
Just how hipstery you in the areas.
Yeah, well, especially where I live now, it's all like there's no commercial like big chains. It's all mom and pops, and a lot of them are using Square. Some of them on like Androids too. But that seems to be, and that's kind of an interesting improvement in some sense because once you are registered with Square, it kind of recognizes you again. And it's a quick payment process. They bring it over the table. It automatically does the tip calculation for you if you want.
That's the thing I forgot. In America, you don't have that.
What?
So see, in Canada, everybody has these mobile at restaurants. They have these.
Oh, really?
So you don't ever. Your credit card never leaves your possession. The waitress or waiter, whatever, comes over your table, and it's like, "There's your receipt. You owe us this much." I type that in, and then they hand it to you. You stick in your card. It's like, okay, I want to tip either, and then you select dollar amount or percentage, and then you enter it in. And it's like, so that'll be your total. It's like, actually, I want to change it. That's too much or too little.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Exactly. Yep.
So I want to round it out to be exactly an even number or whatever.
Yep.
And then you're like, okay, and then it's like, and you enter your PIN number, and it's okay, and then it's okay. Take your card out and give the machine back, and then they get their copy of the receipt, and it's done.
I do actually
and
really
they do
like
this
it
at your table.
Yes, exactly. And I also prefer to go paperless, so I've just registered my email address with Square, so I just get all my receipts sent to my email address, which is nice too.
Cool. But so the Square readers, they're just tiny thing that connect via the audio jack on the phone.
Yeah,
so they obviously don't support chip.
No, but they have a new one coming out, I think, that does, and I think it connects maybe over Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or something, or Lightning. I
think a physical connection is better, but
yeah. Oh yeah.
At the same time, having to have it sticking out of the device is more cumbersome to use at a permanent installation. Right? The the Square was really designed for really mobile applications.
Yeah. I've seen some. I don't know if I doubt they're Square, but I've seen some. They're like a whole case too, and it's a whole. Then the tablet just goes into the case.
Right.
That is now. You're right. At the chains and the big box stores and the brands, none of that. I'm not seeing any of that. But
just it wouldn't tie into other stuff.
Right, but at all of the kind of more boutique ones, it's really big, and everything from not just like restaurants, but like hairstylists and antique stores and a candle. Alan, I went to a nunnery that makes wax candles from beeswax. Like this nunnery has a whole bunch of bees, honeybees and stuff, and they sell the honey and they take the wax and stuff and they make candles, and they use Square and an iPad to sell you the candles. So it's it is really kind of, I don't know what they're
fancy candles. I happen to know somebody who sells fancy candles.
I don't know what they're going to do though with what the nuns going to do, Alan, if they don't take chip. What are they going to do, Alan? They can't chip and dip.
In particular, they would be on the hook if you, after buying the candle,
right,
went
those
to your
nuns
bank.
those nuns are liable.
Well, if you buy the candle and they go to your bank and say, "Hey, I didn't shop there," or even just less maliciously, "I don't remember buying anything there," because maybe the name on the receipt that shows up on the credit card statement is a little strange, right? Doesn't match up to your memory of candle store because it was like
right.
What's a who's it nunnery or whatever.
Yeah. All right. So, okay, moving on. That wasn't the point of the story.
Sorry. We got really distracted there. So it seems even with the liability shift, which Visa and MasterCard hoped would push merchants to be ready on time, many merchants have not completed upgrades to their payment systems or cash registers. So even though maybe they have updated terminals, their back-end system that connects to the terminal isn't all upgraded yet.
Surprise.
Many merchants, and then apparently many of the acquiring banks or acquirers, basically the other end that the terminal talks to actually bill your credit card, have long queues for their certification process. So, once you have your updated software, it often has to be actually certified with by the bank that it's going to interact with so that they can make sure it's going to work and not act funny or whatever. And apparently there's a line for that. And so, you end up, you submit your software and it's like, yeah, in 6 months, we'll let you know if your software is okay. And we found this issue and then do it over again.
That's compelling for somebody trying to get something to market. Yeah, that's great.
Although, it's very compelling for the more expensive vendor to say, hey, ours has already been certified.
Yeah, this is an interesting problem because so you have something that's going to make it something hard for a lot of people on a budget to acquire. Plus, you have something that's going to make it slowing it down so there's not a lot of competition entering the market. Then you have the actual point of end purchasers who are waiting because they want the rest of the market to adopt to train the consumers. So you literally have resistance at almost every stage of the system. And that is a recipe for something that's going to take forever to be adopted.
Yeah, although the rest of the world has already adopted it. The U.S. is the only one out of the G20 that doesn't have it.
America!
And your attempt to adopt it isn't even going full force in the first place. You're not expecting people to remember a PIN number. Because, if people aren't used to that, I can understand that, imagine the level of forgotten PIN numbers.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm pretty sure Donald Trump's going to make everything great again, so I'm not so worried about it.
Right. Anyway, Visa said based on recent client surveys, it expects 50% of face-to-face card accepting merchants to have chip card transactions enabled by the end of the year. But even 50% adoption can mask a long tail of the smaller merchants, right? As we see, the big stores will have it, but a lot of the little places might not.
Right.
And, they will put off as long as they can the expensive software and hardware upgrades to accept chip transactions.
And guess who's maybe
hopefully as they do that, it will be less expensive.
Yeah, the problem with like the mom and pop stores or the smaller places that are going to be resistant to adopt it, they also could become targets.
Yep.
So,
although, if they're on the older ones that don't really have much software versus if they move to a new one that's, a Windows computer with the software, maybe they're actually less vulnerable at first. So the United States is the last of the G20 countries to move to the more secure chip-based cards. As late as the U.S. is on EMV implementation globally, the process of merchants shifting to all EMV transactions is still going to take several more years. Visa said it typically took about 3 years after the liability shift for other countries before 90% of payment card transactions were chip-on-chip, which is a chip card in a chip terminal. So on average, it took 3 years. I guess it was just in other countries, it started so long ago that it wasn't so much of a thing.
Yeah.
They say historically, software was developed by the terminal manufacturers, the places that made the actual card swiping machine, with very few, with just a few contract programmers who kept up on old school operating systems, because it was often embedded with like a real-time OS or something, not even like a Linux. Software development kits and so on for each terminal manufacturer. So there's just this small pool of people that wrote the software for all the terminals. Even if they were, as you're a contractor, you work for like 3 different of these companies that maintain their various different models of terminals. So it was easy for merchants and processors to get going. Installed these specialized tweaks that created countless variants of the different terminals. Now the software is more complicated because it involves, correctly implementing cryptography, and the terminal vendors are struggling to keep up because they all of a sudden either need to find more contractors than there are, or build an in-house staff of developers to build these terminals. So it's all of a sudden, it's not so much about we're a company that builds this physical device as a terminal. It's we're a software company that sells our software bundled on this terminal.
Yeah.
And so either new companies have to come along or the old companies have to shift.
Right.
They say there are also very few EMV software developers who understand the US market. So most of the people that develop EMV software are from the rest of the world where, transactions are often different.
Sure.
One of the most interesting things is if you go to a restaurant with a group of people in the US or Canada and then you ask for a split bill at the end or something, usually the waitstaff will like roll their eyes at you and grumble and so on. But in Sweden, they're like, yeah, we'll just go up to the cash register. They split it all up and it was done. And in Sweden, when I paid with cash the one time, they were like, oh, right. Yeah, that doesn't happen very often.
Oh.
I was like, everybody uses cards.
Yeah, in the U.S., the protocol is, especially if it's a group, is you're supposed to give the waitstaff like a heads up maybe before you start ordering.
Right. I understand that, to keep the things separate.
Yeah, yeah.
But oftentimes they're like, even if you do at the beginning, they're like,
Yeah. You should have, when we were at the meetup at Scale and there was like 60 people there, I was like, just so you know, this is going to be complicated because I'm going to buy everybody's appetizer, but they're going to have to get everything else because I don't have enough money to buy food for all these people. And she looks at me like, okay, I can do that. Yeah. I felt bad.
But, basically every country is a bit different and, so finding people that understand what the U.S. checkout process is like versus in other countries to actually write the software for the terminals. Yeah. My biggest gripe with the terminals I use at my grocery store is the way they formatted the text to fit it on the screen. In the one part where it says, do not remove card. And so remove card is the biggest text on its own line. But if you look just above it, it says, do not. Right?
It's kind of confusing, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's like if they had just word wrapped it slightly differently. So it says, do not, so that it was more clear that you shouldn't take out the card. And then later it just says remove card.
Okay.
It's like,
okay. Okay. Boy, I don't know, Alan. I'm done with cards, really.
But they say there's an invisible hand at work that is about to kick everyone in the pants and accelerate U.S. EMV adoption.
Okay.
If you use a chip card at a point of sale and they say swipe, and you later say, that wasn't actually me, I didn't buy that, there's very little the merchant can do to dispute this charge. It's going to happen because what people aren't thinking about is friendly fraud. When people are made aware that if I swipe and I have a chip card, that lunch can be free if I'm a bad consumer. Right? And so I think that is probably what will drive the adoption at the smaller places.
Yeah.
Now, in particular, the one place I talked to is like dry cleaners. They're not that worried about it. But at other places, maybe they are.
Like a community hardware store. I know that a big problem that is happening in our neck of the woods is people are coming in and stealing things or using they're like these charged Visa cards that have somehow gotten
the stored value ones.
Yeah, and they're coming in and buying a bunch of goods with those and walking off and stuff like that. And I don't know exactly how this would change those kinds of things. Would there be a change there? Because wouldn't you still have these charged cards but with a pin and a chip?
Sure, but if you have a card with a pin and you if you have a card with the chip and you use the chip, then the bank is liable for the fraud. If I show up with a chip card and you won't let me use the chip and make me swipe, then the store is liable.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But just a note, that's fraud, right? If you purposely say, "Oh, I didn't make that charge in order to get your free lunch or whatever," and screw the merchant.
Yeah, but obviously there's plenty of people that aren't above doing that.
Exactly. If you're curious about chip card swipe adoption in your area, Krebs took an informal survey. He did an unscientific survey involving a shopping spree one recent morning with no fewer than 7 different retail locations.
Shopping spree!
Which revealed exactly 7 different chip-capable payment terminals, instructing customers to please swipe card.
I think Krebs just went on a shopping spree and then wrote it off as a tax expense.
But he found that, all of them had a different terminal. Whereas here, there's only so many terminals that I normally see. There's a couple of specific brands.
Oh, really? You don't have almost everywhere I go has a different one.
There's at least 10 maybe, but not that many more than that.
Really?
Well, one of the major banks here owns one of the terminal companies, and they push theirs pretty hard. Mm-hmm. So you see a lot of Naris terminals.
Yeah.
And then, the Ingenico one that somebody just linked in the chat room is another one of the really popular ones here in Canada.
A global leader in seamless payment, if the link is to be believed.
Yes.
Fascinating, Alan. You know what I think is sort of the meta story here, and Krebs is doing a great job of covering it, is this is a significant transition in how the U.S. does its payments for its economy. And we're going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 years down the road, and we're going to look back at this. And well, actually what I mean is that when we get 5 to 10 years down the road, it's just going to be the new normal. We're not even going to realize there was some big transition, but this is sort of documenting that transition. So we actually will be able to look back and remember when we made the switch like this. That's kind of neat.
I remember, when cards were a thing at the time or whatever, but going into the old local hardware store and they still had the old chunk machine.
Yes.
That did an impression of the card. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, what is that? And then, last year 2 years ago now? Yeah. In 2014 at Meet BSD, I bought a history DVD about BSD off Kirk McKusick, and he had one of these that he hauls around with him to conferences to do it. I'm like,
awesome.
Dude, get a square thing for your phone.
Yeah.
It's much lighter to carry around than this ka-chunk machine.
That's just a half of it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think when I think it was the PF Chang's when they got their point of sales terminals compromised, they were going to switch back to the ka-chunk machine.
Yes. Sad. Very sad. Well, any closing thoughts on this particular story, Mr. Jude?
My big question is, does typing your PIN really take that much longer than signing a receipt?
No. My answer is no, it does not.
Yeah.
In fact, it might even be faster because you don't have to fish for a pen. You don't have to get the receipt just right. Or, if it's on the screen, you don't have to do the half-assed signature.
Oh, the screen, those is that proves how useless the signatures are.
I know, it really does. You know what else?
Half the time, there's a third of 3 letters and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know what else is, I don't think, I've put signatures on there that look like, a total forgery because they're just so horrible. And it's not like somebody's in the bank. Well, there's Mr. Fisher's signature. There's that one doesn't look like Chris. Nobody's doing that.
Well, exactly. You could just put an X every time and it works really fine.
All right, Alan. Well, then let's take a moment and talk about something else. Let's talk about Ting. TechSNAP.ting.com. Please go there to support the show and get yourself $25 off your first Ting device or $25 in service credit if you have a Ting-compatible device. And you just might because they got CDMA and GSM. What's up? So you could just check over on Ting's site. They got a compatibility checker. Average monthly bill per device for Ting is 23 bones. Right there. $6 for the line. And then it's just your usage on top of that for minutes, messages, and megabytes. They have fanatical customer support. It's just part of the plan. What I love now is when they're busy, you can call them and be like, Yeah, Ting, call me back when you got times. You hang up, right? And you just go about your life. Like, you got things to do, and then Ting will call you. They'll call you and work with you, which is super slick and really nice way to do it. Then on top of that, which really kind of almost eliminates the need for their incredible customer service, is they have a really, really, really great dashboard that really is, I think, the best out there. You can manage every aspect of the device of each individual line. Very clear where your bill's going. That's a really nice tool. They have really great phones, from feature phones all the way up to the Cadillac devices. Ting, I think there's those of you out there who are in small business, and maybe you have people that you want to give a phone to, like I do, like Mr. Rikai, right? He's stuck right now in the storms on the East Coast, and he's keeping me updated on when he's going to be back using his Ting phone. And if I didn't give him that line, I would have no idea where the hell my editor is right now, because he was supposed to arrive last night at midnight. He's still not here. And so as a small business owner, it's not like I can afford to, every time I want to give somebody a line, spend another $60 a month or $125 a month. And the thing about Rikai is he's a clever guy. He just stays on Wi-Fi most of the time, so it really almost costs me nothing. And this is a really nice advantage if you're a small business or a family. This is something to consider, because at $6 a line, it's an incredible value. Also, I think maybe if you're in school, you might want to consider it. I know we have some folks in the college age that watch the TechSNAP program, and maybe you've wondered why you don't see more Ting on college campuses.
So Paul L. on Facebook asks, would you consider discounts or extra Ting credits for college students interested in Ting? I think it would be a great way to get your service known for the younger population.
So we absolutely would consider that. We love college students. We thought college students would be a great fit for Ting. Usually people are on a tight budget. People have Wi-Fi on campus, so you can literally live on Wi-Fi most of the time. And I think people could have, $10, $15 phone bills every month. The funny thing is, when we started to go to campuses and talk to people about Ting Mobile, we found way too many people who weren't even paying their own phone bills. They were on their family's phone bills, which is great for them. But it was sort of a long shot for us to get all these kids to convert their families to Ting. So we sort of gave up on it maybe a little bit, but we should dive back in. I think there's probably loads of college kids that are paying their own bills, that are on a tight budget, and we could do really well there. So we'll take a look at it.
It's not just college kids on a tight budget. TechSNAP.ting.com. Spend your money wisely. And by the way, no early termination fees and no contract. Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool, too. You just pay for what you use. TechSNAP.ting.com to support the show and try out their savings calculator. Okay, Alan, this headline from the Register has gotten my attention. Patient monitors altered, drug dispensaries popped in colossal hospital hack. Now, I actually read about this. It didn't seem super colossal to me, but it does seem like a sign of things to come. What are your thoughts?
Well, so this was not bad guys attacking the hospital. This was the hospitals working with researchers for 2 years to see where the problem areas at the hospitals were.
Oh, I gotcha.
But the research was their assessment of 12 different healthcare facilities, 2 healthcare data centers, 2 active medical devices from 1 manufacturer, and 2 web applications that remote adversaries can easily deploy attacks against.
So essentially the full stack, as it were, sir.
Yeah, so they basically looked at everything and basically were able to compromise all of it.
Oh.
They say we demonstrate that a variety of deadly remote attacks were possible with these facilities, of which 4 attack scenarios are presented in the report. So as you might expect, this is a PDF. As you might not expect, it is a 71-page PDF.
Yay! And we have it linked, of course, in the show notes.
Yes, because I couldn't read the whole thing to you.
No.
Yeah, but this is one overarching finding of our research is that the industry focuses almost exclusively on the protection of patient health records, because that's the thing where there's laws protecting. You have your HIPAA and so on, right? And so that's where everybody spends all their time and energy, and rarely address threats to or the protection of patient health itself from cyber threat perspective. Protecting patient health records has been a thing since before computers, right? They were locked up in rooms and there was controlled access. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of continued. Mm-hmm. But what has changed is that all of a sudden, that the heart monitor at the side of your bed is connected to the network so that it can notify the nurse across the building instead of only by making beeping noises that somebody would have to hear. Mm-hmm. And no thought seems to be being put into, well, what would happen if I could remotely connect to that device and turn the alarm off so that when the patient started having trouble breathing, no one would be notified and they would pass away.
Is that actually true? I mean, are these manufacturers
they
actually
to
building
do that? Like, obviously, this network is meant to be segregated, right? It's meant to be not connected to the internet. But
it seems like if you're building something like this, you'd have to take that into consideration. Yeah. It's dumbfounding that they couldn't have thought of that. And then partially it's also implementation, right? Because how's the hospital putting on the network? How are they securing that network?
The hospital's not hiring capable enough IT people or whatever, right? Because IT is not really the focus of the hospital, except until you realize that, all those heart monitors are networked so that at the nurse's station, there's this one big display and it says, oh, somebody should go check on the patient in room 307 or whatever, right? But yeah, so we'll get to the specific compromises in a minute. They also say the background, motivating factors, nuances, and misunderstandings that proliferate the healthcare industry with regard to security are discussed at length in the report. In summary, we find that different adversaries will target or pursue and compromise patient health records, while others will target or pursue compromise of patient health itself. So if you scroll up a little bit, there's a chart with red and yellow squares. Yeah, that's one. So you can see if it's just an individual person or a small group and a little icon of a guy wearing a baseball cap, they're mostly untargeted attacks. So they're just scanning the whole internet or whatever, and if they find your thing, they might attack it. And that's the thing that and they're mostly after health records, because then you can use that information to steal somebody's identity or something, or to get free prescriptions and healthcare fraud. So that's the thing they're mostly protecting against. But then you have the political groups and hacktivists who might be after the health records of a specific person or targeting a specific hospital or something. Then, and that's represented by a little bust of a guy with the not quite the anonymous mask, but obviously what it's meant to be.
Yeah, okay, yeah, all right.
I'm not sure what the organized crime icon is supposed to be.
Well, it's like a gangster in a sombrero.
Well, I think it's supposed to be the trench coat and hat.
Yeah, with a tie. He's got a nice tie. He's the only guy that has a tie.
And he's got like a cigarette or something, though.
Or a cigar. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. So organized crime will target specific victims with patient health attacks. So they'd actually, maybe turn off somebody's heart monitor, or one of the other ones they did was compromise an insulin pump and cause it to kill a person.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Yeah. And then nation states just want everything.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, and they have terrorism, where terrorism will, imagine the terror you could create by causing a bunch of people in hospital to die.
I like that it's indiscriminate or specific. Could be either,
Well, right. They could go after specific people because those people would cause even more of a thing, or just kill lots of random people.
So this is the threat grid to your health records and health information, right? This is the threat grid. That's what I'm calling it.
But they say the two major flaws in the healthcare industry with regard to the threat model are, one, the focus is almost entirely on protecting patient records instead of considering, actually protecting the patients.
Right.
And two, the measures taken address only unsophisticated adversaries, essentially only one of the adversaries listed in that table, the individual or small group adversary, which is in yellow. The industry is aware of and seeks and speaks to organized crime and nation-state adversaries, but deeply underestimates their sophistication and motivation, right? We've seen that stolen health records can sell for quite a bit. So if you're organized crime and you can steal 100,000 records and sell them for $500 a piece, that's a big thing.
Also, it's great for blackmail, which nation states could also use. Hand information for blackmail against politicians, things like that.
Yep. And yeah, same thing for nation states. They can force you to become a spy for them by blackmailing you or whatever.
Absolutely.
But the other one is obviously, they can steal information from the hospital that isn't specific to patients, but we'll get to that in a minute. The strategies aim to curtail blanket or untargeted or indiscriminate attacks to obtain patient health records, and ignores the motivations and strategies that would be employed if targeted patient health or specific victims' health records were being targeted. Right? So the hospital is assuming it's just blanket attacks going to get any health record. which will have certain characteristics, whereas they don't seem to defend against, one person that specifically wants records from one specific person would attack the hospital in a very different way.
So if I wanted Alan Jude's records versus everybody in the hospitals?
Right. If I wanted just anybody's records, I would look at every hospital and find the one with the worst security and go there.
Yeah, yeah. But if I knew you'd gone to this place and I want to know why you went there, I might use maybe more social engineering or something, more of a physical attack.
Yeah, I could basically pretend to be another hospital or something and either transfer the records. Who knows? But the motivations and scenarios are highlighted in red on that table that we looked at. But yeah, so the protection of health records has been around for a long time, but it seems that the industry hasn't really noticed that a lot of the medical devices are now connected to the network and aren't being protected very well. So in the paper, they describe attacking an insulin infusion pump, a patient monitor station, and a barcode reader. So what's interesting mostly is about the monitor one, right? If you're hooked up to this machine and it measures your heart rate and your blood oxygen level and your pulse and so on.
Yeah.
Well, if I turn the alarms off, then the nurses don't come when you're in distress. But the other thing I could do is purposely trigger the alarm, which might cause them to inject you with, saying your heart rate's flatline or something, and then they inject you with adrenaline, and now your heart explodes because it was fine and you didn't need that shot of adrenaline.
I would also assume there's probably systems out there that automatically respond and do those kinds of things.
I don't know about automatically for injecting.
For probably something like that, right? Sure.
Yeah, not for something that might hurt you, but yes. So by raising a false alarm, they could actually cause the hospital staff to do you harm, and so on. And then they also attacked a barcode reader, which is used for inventorying the medicine and so on. And so then they could make it appear like the hospital has lots of a medicine when they don't, and causing a shortage when all of a sudden they go to get it and it's not there, or make it possible for them to steal narcotic type things and so on, right?
Sure.
Or even maybe cause them to be mislabeled or something and give you the wrong medication. But they looked at a bunch of different areas in the hospital where they could attack. The first is obviously the patient health, right? If they can cause the hospital to hurt you instead of help you, that would definitely reach their goal possibly, which might, organized crime might be, let's make sure the witness doesn't survive their gunshot wounds or whatever. And then they have the patient health records, which we've talked about, which are worth money and, people want them. And then politically motivated things, maybe they want it for other reasons, but organized crime and so on, they're definitely worth money. Service availability. If you can cause all the heart monitors in the hospital to go down, that can cause a lot of trouble. And, maybe people don't survive because of it.
And maybe you have no other motive than to cause them some problems because you're disgruntled. I mean, remember, it doesn't have to be to get money or hurt anybody. It could just be, F those guys.
Well, and also, technically, these could happen by accident.
That's
somebody
true.
gets
Misconfiguration
a email virus and it
malware,
messes up the network, and now, the last is, how many times have you gone into a store or something and it's like, oh, our system is slow or our system is down, blah, blah, blah. Well, that really can't happen if it's a critical system at a hospital.
Right.
Well, it can't be allowed to happen, but it can actually happen. And so attacking that can cause all kinds of problems. And then that can cause the hospital problems in community confidence and trust.
Sure.
Nobody really wants to go to the hospital if there's a good chance their computer is going to kill you.
Yeah, or your information is going to get stolen, then your identity is going to get,
Exactly. Especially, if it's certain types of things having to do with reproductive health or whatever, and things that are sensitive. Then there's research and development and intellectual property. Research hospitals have stuff that, maybe governments in other countries would like to steal. New treatments or new drugs or whatever. Or maybe they're not even other governments. It's just other drug companies or whatever. And then there's obviously business advantage. And then hospital finances. We've seen the hospitals pay to get rid of ransomware, but if you broke into the hospital, you could just drain their bank accounts or steal all their payroll information. You could cause all kinds of problems just because hospitals are a giant employer that has lots of people's social security numbers just for staff, not even thinking of customers. Right. And, in the U.S., hospital stays are expensive. And so hospitals have lots of money. And then obviously you could attack just the hospital's reputation or even the individual physician's reputations. Anyway, it's a 71-page report, and if you're at all interested, you should definitely read it. It's The company that did it is originally spawned out of John Hopkins University, which is famous for healthcare.
Yeah, it's very much so, actually.
And they have checklists and stuff for the hospitals to start looking at, improving. And
those of you out there in IT that either work with hospitals or have clients in this area, use this PDF in the show notes to push this conversation forward.
I think one of the biggest ones they pointed out is a lot of hospitals rely on just buying some appliance or software or whatever that's been, certified or audited for HIPAA or whatever. It's like, that doesn't actually mean it's secure. It just means it's been audited.
Right, yeah. Yeah, they often look at it from HIPAA has been such a focus point for the healthcare industry for so long that everything is pretty much designed around, what about HIPAA? What about HIPAA? And it's so much more than HIPAA. That's the takeaway. It's so much more than HIPAA. All right, Alan, you know what else is so much more? IX Systems. Head over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP and go find rigs powered by these incredible Intel processors. I had a revelation in the shower, Alan. I know why these Intel CPUs are so killer fast. Do you remember that episode of Voyager where they go back to the 90s and then there's this guy and he has a chip from the future, from a time ship, and he bases his whole company off of the crazy technology that came from the future?
No, Voyager wasn't the best Star Trek.
Yeah, but this is it was a two-parter, too, and they go back, and they're walking around in California. I think that was Intel giving us the hint that that's why Intel CPUs have gotten so crazy fast. And IX Systems, I think they just figured out early on, and they got these rigs built around there, and they have a bunch of amazing systems now. Low-end systems, like with the the Celeron CPU, or no, it's an Atom CPU in the FreeNAS, which I really want bad, which is really cool.
Well, I'm not supposed to say anything, but I might have seen a bigger version of the FreeNAS.
Oh man, I tell you what, we are up to
8
our
drives?
we have passed the point of no return on storage. I think we're down to 100 gigs free or less.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's no good.
Really need to get some then.
Yeah, I know. So you know where I need to go? ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. Yep. I could be like Alan Jude. Alan Jude went there in person. Look at this guy hanging out at IX Systems. See, when Alan comes to the West Coast, he does it right. How was that?
That was cool. I got to see their offices and meet, my sales rep that I've been working with lately. And also, as you can see there, behind me is the production floor.
Yeah.
And, it's basically an assembly line for computer. I saw a whole bunch of FreeNAS minis being put together and a bunch of servers as well.
Did you grab me one by chance? Because I could really use one. Oh, darn.
Well, see, I couldn't go any further. You can't really see it, but just behind me on the floor is this line on the floor.
Yep.
And you're not allowed in there without all the electrostatic protection gear.
Yeah, I've been on a similar kind of thing. Now, tell me about...
So first of all, you see that I'm now wearing this weird shirt.
Yeah.
I've always wondered, why are the people at IX all wearing that same
doctor's uniform looking thing? Yeah.
Well, you can't really tell in the picture, but when you look at it up close, there's like a wire mesh all up in this shirt.
Oh, I can
and it's
see
basically
on the bottom there.
Protection for electrostatic discharge.
I thought it was just custom fit to hang on you. No, I can see the mesh sort of in the bottom.
Well, that's also why the sleeves are a bit short like that. It's so that they don't get in your way while you're working, because it's not meant to be a shirt. It's actually to keep static from electrocuting machines while you're working on them.
Huh.
So they're very serious about the ESD stuff, and they do a very good job there with all the grounded benches and stuff. But then I get to see this machine.
This rig, because this seems like something I need to have here at JB1.
Yeah, so this is a chassis that holds 90 hard drives.
I'm sorry,
inserted
what?
from the top.
90?
So, yes. So basically, it comes out of the rack, and then this big lid flops open, and you just slot in up to 90 hard drives.
Wow.
And then there's a picture of it full.
98 terabyte hard drives.
Yeah. 90. Quick math question. What's 90 times 8 terabytes?
Wow, Alan, that's exactly what I need. I'll tell you what it is exactly the amount of storage I need. Wow.
I imagine you don't actually need that much right now.
No, not at the moment, but eventually.
Yeah. And then so this is just a JBOD. So at the back is just all power supplies and fans. And then
that's
you
perfect.
Connect to it. Then you connect it to your TrueNAS controller head or whatever, and you have your Epic storage machine. And the best part is those shelves. The customer that's buying that is actually buying 2 of those.
Oh jeez. Oh jeez.
Yeah, you can't see, but the second one's off frame there, and they're pulling the hard drives out because they had all the hard drives in it and they tested it. And then once it's been through the burn-in process, they take the hard drives out and ship them separately in a separate box with even more padding, because the chassis doesn't really provide the protection for shipping that I don't know if you've seen the way they pack the stuff when they ship it.
Yeah, they're super careful.
Yes, they're very.
All right, so there you go. That gives you a picture from free NAS minis all the way up to 98 terabyte systems. Check them out at ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. And a big thanks to IX Systems for sponsoring the TechSNAP program and for showing Mr. Jude there a little bit of the floor. That's pretty darn cool. I'd like to see that myself. Okay, Alan, so guess what? We're moving right along, and we have something called the Keybase. What is this? I thought Keybase was a identity service online, not a piece of software.
Not Keybase.io. This is a piece of malware called Keybase.
I'm like, this has thrown me for a loop. So Keybase malware. Tell me about this.
Yeah. So this is basically a rather simple keylogging malware that's gone, whose usage has gone through the roof after the program to build a custom version of it accidentally leaked online last summer. So it's a spyware family that can capture your keystrokes and also steal data from the user's clipboard and take screenshots of your desktop at regular intervals and upload them to the website.
Oh, lovely. Okay. Good.
So, yeah, caught red-handed, its author promised to stop working on the malware and close down the website where he was selling copies of it for $50.
My bad.
But then the builder program leaked online, and now anybody can build their own version of it. So it said, researchers have also discovered that while Keybase's control software was secured with authentication, the folder where it puts all the images that were uploaded is not. So the researchers were able to put together a simple script and find all the different screenshots and get copies of them.
Jesus. So this guy, how did he get caught and then just got, a slap on the wrist? What happened there, Alan?
Well,
that
I
sounds
don't
like
think
some
he got
bullcrap.
caught by the police or anything. He just got outed as who he was or whatever.
Got doxxed or okay.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, using this simple method, Palo Alto researchers discovered 62 different domains where Keybase control panels were installed, and they found 82 different control panels, 125,000 screenshots from about 1,000 computers.
Oh, nice.
Of all the infected computers, over 200 were in corporate environments, 75 were personal computers, 150 were used for both, and about 50 included details for more than one user, meaning that they were a shared asset, either used by multiple work colleagues or multiple family members. Taking a look at the screenshots, the researchers discovered images depicting online banking portals, invoices, blueprints, video camera feeds, email inboxes, social media accounts, financial documents, booking software, and more. With both personal and corporate banking details, it'd be fairly easy to do some shenanigans there. Plus, if you have a keylogger, you probably have the username and password that way.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
They also found a hotel reservation system. So you could make yourself free reservations or something.
Yeah, and like the chat room is pointing
Actually,
out.
the hotel reservation software had a pretty nice looking dashboard. It was not the crappy software I would expect. It was something new.
You know what I'm surprised is not on this list? Porn.
They had some dating site stuff near the bottom.
Okay. Well, pretty tame though. I
I imagine they just don't mention the porn because it's not that interesting.
Okay.
It says the set of educational institutions wasn't notably attributed to any one panel, so it's not like any one of the attackers was targeting educational places, but equally distributed across them. What made it stand out, though, is the same tactic to delivering the Keybase phishing malware was applied here. Basically, they sent the email to the admissions people at the various colleges and universities or whatever, and these individuals are constantly sent Word or PDF documents, allegedly from parents or students, and so they just open them and then they get infected.
Of course.
There's even one
good old attachment.
Where one of the screenshots is from the school while they're writing a broadcast email to parents about cybersecurity for your kids.
Oh, good. Classic.
And it's being, and the computer they're doing that is infected with malware. It's pretty awesome.
Beautiful.
From one of the other ones, they actually got like a list of students and all their personal information from the college, and yeah.
Client data for some people, from some people.
Yeah. Bank detailed everything. In the original Keybase report, Palo Alto revealed that the malware's creator managed to infect himself during the keylogger's testing.
Brilliant.
And had his activities recorded through screenshots and then sent to the web control panel. This apparently happened again with 16 different people that are running these Keybase installations managed to infect themselves.
Good.
So 16 out of the about 100 people that have been using this managed to infect themselves.
Idiots.
Although some of them, it seems it was
A
just
test?
to see if it was working.
Yeah.
Although a bunch of them, it seems that there were some in-app script kiddies and so on. The screenshots saved from their PC show that while a few were just curious script kiddies and so on, some of the other hackers are actually professionals involved in highly targeted campaigns. So if you scroll down to the bottom there, they have a series of screenshots from different attackers and getting to look an insight into what they're doing. Like I think it was attacker number 6. The resolution on the machine was so high that the screenshot only covered the top left corner of the screen. However, it was enough to make out some interesting observations on tactics. The attacker appeared to be trying to engage in romance scams with multiple women, along with preying on seniors through dating sites.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. There was one where an attacker could be seen logging into a number of different hacked online like webmail accounts like Gmail and Yahoo and so on. And some other ones where you can see them attacking people, or somewhere they're just sending spam or whatever. They say our analysis provides a unique opportunity to see the entire life cycle of a malware infection. Commonly, we see the first image is set to be the Keybase executable or malicious document. So because it starts taking screenshots as soon as it gets installed, you get to see from the second the malware gets installed through usually the pop-up from the antivirus program saying it's going to remove it, and then it gets killed. So, but you get to see this whole series of the screenshots.
Right.
Sometimes that happens all in one screenshot. So there's one where like there's a screenshot of the malware running and the virus scanner detecting it all at the same time.
Yeah, there's some private chats.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's bad guys on hacker forums, but people's Facebook accounts, bank accounts.
Uploading YouTube videos.
There's a shipping company creating shipments.
Using proxy software.
Yep. So these are the attackers, but if you look up at the other people, there's one with like a shipping company creating a shipment. You can tell because the background, the desktop wallpaper is like a bunch of ships or something.
Security machine.
There's security cameras at a hotel. There's the hotel check-in system. Look at that dashboard for the hotel. It's awesome. It's like how many people are checking out today? How many have already checked out? It's very useful if you worked at the front desk.
Here's some Outlook.
Just looking at, there's even like engineering drawings. You can tell that some of these attackers are using it to attack like industry competitors and so on.
Yeah, somebody's Yahoo Mail.
Yep, and there's somebody wire transferring $1 million.
Wow.
Stuff.
Really interesting.
Of course, when it's on a machine infected with malware, you wonder if it was the owner of the machine transferring $1 million or another attacker who happens to be being recorded.
Taking care of that. Let me take care of that. That's a great link if you guys want to check that out in the show notes, because you can look at all the pictures. All the pretty pictures. Lots of them. Yeah, there's the engineering drawing one. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this story, Mr. Jude?
No, that's about it.
All right, my friend, then let me tell you about DigitalOcean, sponsor of the TechSNAP program. Go over to DigitalOcean.com and use the promo code SNAPOcean to get some credit. A $10 credit, as a matter of fact, which is pretty handy because their rigs start only $5 a month, so you can try a rig for 2 months for free. And in less than 55 seconds, you'll have a system with 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, a blazing fast CPU, and a terabyte of transfer. DigitalOcean straightforward hosting, My Linux infrastructure on demand. They've got free BSD systems too. They got data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, London, Germany, Toronto. Really nice systems too, but a great interface on top of all of it. Something
I've
really
heard
nice.
rumors of another data center coming soon.
I have too. You got your ear down to the ground for DigitalOcean, Alan. You're on the top of these data centers. Yeah, I've heard that.
Well, the Canadian one is because they sent me an email about having to pay tax.
Yeah, that was kind of, Oh, well, they must be opening something. They do. You're right, and they're continuing to expand like crazy for a good reason too. They've combined a great service with a fantastic dashboard. Lots of good pre-set up rigs that are just pulling from upstream repos. Nothing funky in there when you go deploy a rig. It gets updates right from the vendor of the software. They have really simple ways to revert systems back, take snapshots, integrate with a straightforward API. Lots of code already written that uses that API. You can go take advantage of it now, either in a library or at a full-baked application, or plug it in with your existing management infrastructure. And I love their tutorials. I like WordPress. The security of WordPress with the Mint hack is kind of a big topic right now. There's an article that was posted on the 4th of February, How to Protect WordPress from an XML RPC Attack on Ubuntu 14.04. Probably a good one to go through. They have lots of great articles like this. DigitalOcean.com. Go deploy a rig. If you want to try playing with some container technology, DigitalOcean's a great platform to do that. Check it out, DigitalOcean.com, and use the promo code SNAPOcean. And a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. And you can also find that guide that I just mentioned in the community section of DigitalOcean's website. Alan, I do believe there is a brand new episode of BSD Now 130, if I recall, and this would be the one to check out if people are curious about FreeBSD's storage conference. I bet ZFS discussions were had.
Yes, that was mostly what I talked about in the video, because that's the group that I spent most of the time with, and so I only really had the notes from the other groups to talk about. But it was interesting. Seagate said a bunch of people to it, and so we talked a lot about SMR drives as well.
That's actually, it's a pretty big episode. You guys also, of course, like I always covered the news and the Beastie Bits and feedback, and also ZFS coming to Ubuntu and all of that in episode 130 of the BSD Now program. So you guys go check that out at jupiterbroadcasting.com. Give you a chance to download that. By the time the by the time the TechSNAP program wraps up, you could watch it. Speaking of Unfilter, go check out episode 177 for more coverage of the latest developments on the whole iPhone unlocking story, Unfilter 177. But with the news all done here in the feedback, or in the TechSNAP show, I'm all mixed up in the TechSNAP program. Now we're going to go do the feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com, or popping that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or even better, starting a thread in our subreddit at techsnap.reddit.com. That link site hasn't worked for a while, which we actually got one from the subreddit this week. Holy smokes, everybody. You could submit one just like somebody else did. But first, we're going to start with good old email from Patrick. He's got a question I don't think we've ever answered on this show before about creating a read-only file server. He says, I recently helped a small business recover from a ransomware attack. Yikes. We were able to recover their data files from an online backup, but this took about 6 hours. Hey, that's actually not that bad. Their IT consultant said the only way to have a local backup that is immune from this type of attack is tape drives. I wondered if there's a way to set up a file server to act like a CDR drive, where once the data is written, it cannot be changed under normal circumstances. Thanks, Patrick. First of all, do you want to address the tape drive thing, or do you want to just go to the read-only file server?
Tape drives can actually be overwritten and so on, but they kind of work. So in general, this is one of the places where ZFS wins, right? If you take snapshots, then those become read-only, and until you destroy the snapshot, the old version of the file never goes away. We talked about this, I guess it was a year ago now, when I was consulting at the college locally, and they got hit with ransomware, or with crypto locker type thing, and they had to do a restore over their link between two of the campuses, and it basically meant the other campus couldn't use their computers for like 17 hours or something it took to transfer all the files. Whereas if they had a ZFS snapshot, say every 15 minutes, after they get crypto lockered, it's like ZFS rollback to then and snap, done.
Boom.
Fixed. The best part is, if in case there's been changes that's happened after, you create a brand new snapshot called like infected, clone that, and then roll back to the other version or whatever.
Right.
Or actually clone the good snapshot and swap out the mount points.
So that's sort of the way of saying your file. So Patrick, consider what file system your file server is using.
Yeah.
Of course, obviously, we could just mention really quickly, depending on what your file server is, Samba or Windows, it's very easy to just set the shares to read only. So you could have certain shares that your users access that are simply just set to read only via Samba or Windows file sharing.
And the other thing with ZFS is there's actually a read-only property for each data set. So you can leave that on most times, then just turn it off when you're doing the backup, but that's not as handy. The snapshots really are the best way to go. Actually, if you go over the IX Systems blog, they have a whole post from a couple of companies that saved themselves from ransomware using ZFS, and they describe how they set it up.
Nice. All right. Our next question comes in from JellyGel00 is what I'm going with from the subreddit. It says, I'm planning on getting myself a server and install either FreeBSD or FreeNAS, mostly just, to run as a file server. He links to a ProLiant server he's looking at. And he says, I've used some power calculators and it always ends up coming out way too much. I guess because the thing uses a full 750 watts. So he wants to know how much power use how should he expect for a server at home? He says, while it's in standby, etc., I guess it won't be doing much. But this will be my first server at home, and I'd really like to know how much power usage I should expect. What do you think, Alan?
Well, it's definitely not going to be 750 watts. I don't even know if the power supply on that is actually that big. Because it's an older Xeon, like a 5420, that will make it use more power. Although that particular one is the L5420 instead of the E. And so that's a low voltage one, which is meant to save a little bit of power. But in general, it will be not as good as newer hardware at using less power when it's not busy.
It's also going to be loud.
Yes, this particular thing is loud. Depending if you're just building a FreeNAS or something, you might be better off with modern-ish hardware.
Do a PC with a ton of drives, a drive base.
Yeah, although this is a whole machine with the CPU, and I think it says there's RAM in it.
Here's
16 gigs of RAM for $168. That's a pretty good price.
That is not bad. It's here's the thing to remember though. It's not going to use 750 watts. Maybe unless if every drive bay was full, the thing was at maximum load, and
it actually can't use that much.
No. So if you're doing the calculations on that, you're calculating at the absolute worst case scenario. That's probably never even going to reach. So
looking at the L5420 specifically on the Intel site, it uses 50 watts per processor, and you have two, so that you're looking at about 100 watts there. Although that doesn't count when it scales down. Although because it's an older one, it won't scale. This CPU came out in 2008, to give you an idea of how old it is, and was discontinued in 2010. You shouldn't be looking at much more than that. Plus, I think it's about 5 watts per drive, depending on how busy they are. And so on. To give you an example, the machine that I'm actually using right here, which is an i7 4770, it's got a NVIDIA GTX 960 GPU in it, although
that's
because right now all that's happening is like Skype and IRC, the GPU is probably not doing very much.
Yeah.
The draw out of my machine currently is about 60 watts, which is as much as one old-fashioned light bulb, right? Then when you add the 27-inch LED monitor, it goes up to about 90 watts. And so that's all I'm using here. Although, if I fire up a video game, all of a sudden that number will go toward like 200 or something.
Yeah.
I'll use a lot more if I spin up the video game and have the CPU busy and the GPU busy.
Yeah.
But right now, where my my CPU utilization is 7%, my CPU manages to clock itself down, right? The machine will actually underclock itself and lower its voltage and so on to use less power. So in those regards, newer CPUs are better because they do that more and better.
Truth of the matter, though, is it's probably way more machine than he needs for FreeNAS, too.
It's
two Xeon processors for a FreeNAS server?
Well, I didn't actually read. Does that one have two?
Oh.
Yes, it is dual Xeons.
Yeah, I thought it was.
So it does have two. So if you're looking to save power, maybe not the best chassis because you probably can get away with one newer CPU, which will be just as fast as that, which has how many cores? It's 4 cores with no hyper-threading. So in total, you'd have 8 cores at 2.5 gigahertz, which isn't bad, but...
Don't forget about, and maybe you have a great place to put this, but these things are loud enough that you will hear them through walls. So...
well, the fan noise doesn't go through walls as much. But if you have any opening where the sound can get through direct without having to go through a wall, the sound will get
depends
very,
on the rig.
bad.
I mean, some of them do. So it depends on the fan noise, but yeah.
Yeah, but
I know I have a couple of
in our office
units.
where we have a whole rack full of machines. Once we close the door on that room, you don't really hear them.
I have a couple of 1U machines here in production that are
1Us are worse.
Yeah,
because they have really small high pitched fans.
That is a 1U machine that he's looking at.
Yes.
So but not all of them. Some of them also spin the fans down, so they're not so loud. So it's just
right. That was when it wasn't in a separate room, when it was out in the main office part. that was something I would do every once in a while just to screw with the guys down there. Is just log in over the management system and crank the fans up to full power, and it would just like, it would like, zzz,
Nice troll, sir. Nice troll.
and you turn it on, it's like,
If you have thoughts on the power usage, in fact, if you have numbers, I would love to see that. If you've done any kind of like of your own tracking, that is a thread in the subreddit. You can go throw your notes in there.
What I love about the newer hardware, like if you get a new 1U machine from IX, the management system has power monitoring built in, and it actually keeps a graph of its power usage over time. So if it has a duty cycle where it's busy during these times of the day, you'll actually see that on the graph and see how well the CPU is scaling itself down to use less power when it's not busy and only using the power when it is.
That's funny. All right, Alan. So that was a question about power usage. Now we move on to a question I think is on a lot of people's minds from Mike about putting pfSense on some hardware. A longtime listener, I find your show one of the best, yada, yada, yada. Some shows back, Alan mentioned that they have managed to get pfSense onto a TP-Link consumer router.
Okay. I've never said that.
I know,
it's
but
like
we've got
the 20th person who thinks I said that.
I know, Alan.
I've always specifically said that pfSense doesn't work on these routers because it's only x86 currently. Now, pfSense is working on that, but I have no idea when that'll land.
It's funny, though. We must have said something close because we get this all the time.
Well, we talked about building a router on these, but it was always a manual FreeBSD router and not pfSense.
Right.
But everybody just like FreeBSD router. That means pfSense.
That must have been what it was.
Yeah.
So they do have hardware. You could find it. They have partners.
Yes.
You can find it on their website.
Well, yes, they have the pfSense store, and they sell nice hardware that will be like the TP-Link, but has an actual real CPU in it, like an x86 CPU. And it's all been tested, and it's known to work perfectly with pfSense.
Hey,
That's funny.
we need your emails. We really do. Otherwise, we might. You know what? Alan, we could just not do feedback and just have like big roundups if nobody emails us. But people could also, if you've done a pfSense build, take some pictures. Everybody's got a phone that takes pictures and sends emails now. Take a picture, tell us a little bit about it, and send it into the show. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. pfSense gave away some awesome ones at various BSD conferences. At BSDCan, actually, the guy that runs the conference managed to win one with, they had Beastie done up with like a hockey stick and everything because it was the Canadian conference. It was awesome.
Jelly.
But yeah, so for the TP-Links, if you want to get your hands dirty and build a custom build of FreeBSD to put on it and play with messing with the bootloader and overwriting the flash, if that kind of embedded work is interesting to you, on GitHub under the FreeBSD, there's FreeBSD-Wi-Fi-build, which has the instructions for about 10 or 15 different routers. And also, because it's basically related to the router, the Onion Omega little device here,
right?
On how to install FreeBSD on it. And you can do that, but it doesn't work for pfSense currently, partly because you really don't have enough storage.
Alan, before we get out of the feedback segment, you tossed in something that sort of came up today, and we often talk about ZFS storage and often talk about ZFS on Linux here in the feedback segment. And this post from the Software Conservancy came out, and it looks like they're disagreeing with Canonical's decision to implement ZFS shipping with Ubuntu.
Yes, to provide a compiled ZFS. So in particular, basically, they say that the CDDL license that ZFS is under isn't compatible with the GPL v2 that Linux is under. The Software Conservancy or Software Freedom Conservancy has a group of Linux developers who have basically authorized the SFC to do enforcement action on their behalf or whatever. And so, they have their case. Basically, they say Canonical managed to find some lawyers who thought the opposite, that they would work. And that, often that's the case when you do this type of thing, and only a court can really decide. And
right. That really seems to be the key thing. Is it almost seems like
yes, the GPL has never actually been fully tested in court.
The way I read this too is it really seems like what they want is Oracle just to GPL ZFS. They mean because the whole opening paragraph.
Say GPL, they say GPL compatible.
Yeah, you're right. They do. You're right. But the whole opening paragraph is about Oracle, really.
Yeah. Well, at the beginning, yes. Partly because the SFC is trying to be friendly with Canonical. And actually, so far, the agreement between the Conservancy and Canonical is that Canonical has to lobby Oracle to consider doing that to ZFS. Although,
so how
what
does
I've heard through the grapevine is that previously, like a while ago, long before this Linux stuff came up, a company had offered to pay Oracle at least $100 million to relicense ZFS, and Oracle refused.
They're not going to do it, dude. They're not going to do it. Listen, how is this different than any other driver that distribution ship?
That's the one I've kind of wondered. It's like, if it's a separate driver, then that's, it's an external module. It's like, how is that different than EMT?
If the Conservancy is right about this and they set a precedent here, then wouldn't they necessarily be saying the AMD driver, the NVIDIA driver, any driver that...
Basically, there's a couple of different camps. The one camp says that only statically compiled, stuff built into the kernel, is making a derivative thing. And that things that are dynamic modules, like the graphics driver and so on, are not.
Well, and they're not derived from code of the kernel. They don't derive they link to the kernel.
Right. So they use facilities from the kernel to interface with it, but
and that's where the dispute is those facilities, right? But to me, it seems like if this is true, then there's so many other drivers that also are going to be
grades of fanaticism here, right? Like some people think that any touching the GPL code at all contaminates it. And some people are like only static linking, some people are only dynamic linking, and some people, they're like, well,
I think
we just want to be reasonable and have stuff work.
I think the Conservancy is about to find themselves potentially in a position where they are lobbying for things that very powerful players in the Linux ecosystem don't agree with. For example, VMware is a contributor to the Linux Foundation, right? And the Conservancy is suing VMware. I think it is probably in Canonical and SUSE's and Red Hat's best interest for everybody on the Linux side to be able to ship ZFS. And so I bet they're hoping Canonical. I'm sure Red Hat and SUSE are watching this and going, go ahead, Mark, ship Ubuntu with that. Let's see how that plays out in the marketplace. And if they have a win there, they're all going to do it. They're all going to do it. So the Conservancy is pushing a very fine line here.
But the Conservancy is backed by a bunch of people that own chunks of the Linux copyright.
They're also barely struggling to get funding too.
Yes, that is something. But if they were to win the VMware case, then that might change.
Well, and that is their point. They are there to defend the GPL. That's how they see it. And so
exactly.
So who do you think is probably right, Alan? Do you have a gut feeling, or do you think we're gonna have to wait and see?
Well, it's really. Nobody's right. It's kind of this undecidable question because of the way laws work.
So
it's all open to interpretation. Really, it's like, how do you interpret exactly what these words mean? Does making this dynamic logical? Does it making a dynamic module, is that a derivative work, or is it just linking two separate pieces of software that aren't interacting?
That's a big can of worms, Alan.
Yeah, exactly.
Canonical could be the one about to open this in court too, right? I mean, they could get this could go to court.
Yeah. The Software Conservancy is trying to avoid that, partly for publicity. Obviously, starting off diplomatic works best.
Well, and to be honest, but also, a lot of Linux people want their candy. People want this.
Yeah.
Don't take my candy away.
The Software Conservancy's big concern is that the Linux Foundation, which unlike the FreeBSD Foundation, isn't a community-sponsored thing that is out there to improve the project. The Linux Foundation is companies have to pay in order to get access to the foundation and use it to steer things.
Promote themselves or other things.
Yeah, like basically the Linux Foundation doesn't have any community steering on it at all.
Right. That's actually been kind of a recent drama.
Yeah. They had one community person and they got rid of them or whatever, right?
I wonder though, if you look at this, is the Conservancy doing this for political reasons then?
I don't think so. Well, basically their concern is that the Linux Foundation is watering down the GPL and trying to, make it so people can just work with stuff. But that's, the GPL is very specifically about what it's about, right?
So we have to come down to it, depending on how something's connecting to GPL code and what those mechanisms are. Is that derivative? And when that decision, if somebody makes that decision, that's going to answer not just this particular case, but probably a lot of drivers.
Lots of drivers and lots of things. Yeah. And this one is a particular case. Most GPL enforcement stuff is pretty obvious because it's proprietary versus the open GPL. But this is the almost there, right? Because the CDL code in ZFS is open source and it is free software. It's just has a weak copyleft license instead of a strong copyleft license. And it's the license says you can't add more terms to the license. And basically, the CDL says you can't make the license more restrictive, and the GPL is in fact more restrictive by forcing you to do things that are open. And so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. At this point, it's kind of a let it happen. But yes, basically the problem is that everybody wants ZFS. And so most people are on the side of we kind of got to allow this. And then it's like, but is that a slippery slope where now how do we enforce the GPL against anything else?
I think this is beginning a long process of answering some questions that have been floating around for a really long time.
But the bigger question is if they allow ZFS, does that weaken their case against VMware?
I don't think so, because VMware was retaking BusyBox code, right?
Well, the VMware lawsuit isn't about BusyBox. That was settled. This is about the ESXi kernel.
Yeah.
VMware, basically VMware's kernel module. Although I think in theirs, it's less of a module and more of a whole new kernel that happens to have ZFS.
Yeah, I thought it was. Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question.
But yeah.
All right, Alan. Well, so we'll be following this story. See what happens more. And the long process probably now begins. Okay, so we need your frickin' emails. Just going to say it one more time because we do have a double episode next week. And we'd love to get them. JupiterBroadcasting.com/contact questions and all of that. And with that all done, guess what? It means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. The roundup of stories that just didn't fit at the top of the show. But we still want to give you some links to read up on after the show. Give you a quick, brief once-over on them here on the show. And some of these came from our talented, sophisticated, and on top of it all subreddit at techsnap.reddit.com. Some of these. Some of them did not. But our first one did, Alan. It's called Mousejack, injecting keystrokes into wireless mice. Keystrokes into wireless mice. Mousejack is a collection of security vulnerabilities affecting non-Bluetooth wireless mice and keyboards. Spanning 7 vendors, these vulnerabilities enable an attacker to type arbitrary commands into a victim's computer from up to 100 meters away using a $15 USB dongle.
Yep, all those non-Bluetooth wireless mice and keyboards.
Who would ever use something like that? Who would ever? I love my Logitech MX. I think it's great.
My first one ever was an MX 1000, but it was because it was free. I've never wanted a wireless mouse. My mouse sits on the mouse pad. It never the wire's never been a problem for me.
Yeah. For me,
I can see why for you it's just because of how far away the computer is.
Yeah. And I got like 3 mice, right? And so there'd be a lot of wires moving, and you'd hear it rubbing. So we have a little story on how to kill a supercomputer. Aww.
But anyway, yeah, that's a cool story. So yes, how to kill a supercomputer. So this is stories about basically how when you put enough computers together in one spot, or enough RAM in a single computer, you can the rate of the craziness caused by cosmic rays and so on can actually get pretty crazy.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
So yeah, they had one where I think it was 5,000 machines to put together to make this supercomputer. And the cosmic rays would cause a RAM error in the machines that didn't have ECC so frequently that one machine would always be crashing, and they could never get the whole cluster up at once. And then they had other problems with, if the power wasn't clean enough, it could cause enough fluctuations to cause problems. Or one where the voltage regulators would actually die, and they could just never get all the machines to be online at once because they were dying faster than they could fix them. And then they had the IBM Blue Gene. After weeks of searching, the culprit was uncovered. The solder used to make the boards carrying the processors contained radioactive lead that was causing bad data into the L1 cache of the processor.
Wow.
Yeah, there was a bit of radioactive lead in the solder, and it caused just enough random variances to get into the L1 cache that it caused the machine to always have errors.
All right, Alan, I got another story for you. Just a quick one on the whole iPhone story with the FBI trying to get access to the San Bernardino shooter's phone. The FBI has made the case that this is a narrow request about getting access to this one shooter's phone and not about setting precedent, which is a little contemptuous of the public's intelligence because it implies that you don't understand that the way law works is by establishing precedent. Anyways, I could go on and on, but TechDirt did a great job. They wrote it up over here and kind of outlined why actually it's exactly about setting precedent with the All Writs Act here in the U.S. Using that to get access to this, they have actually 11 other cases that will be followed up on if this one gets through.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, the FBI isn't. The Department of Justice is already suing for 12 more phones before this one's even been decided.
Because that's how the law works. It doesn't matter if your intention is to set precedent or not. You set precedent. That's how it works. Yep. It's a good article that kind of.
And that's the same reason, going back to the previous topic, it's the same reason why the GPL's never made it all the way to court, because there's this fear that if the president lands on the wrong side, then either that will make Linux impossible to use in business, or it will take away the protections of the GPL.
So we have something, one of the classiest kinds of roundups, something from the mailing list, from OpenSSL's mailing list.
Yeah, so there's just a head up that they'll be releasing OpenSSL 102G and 101S on March 1st, sometime between 1300 and 1700 UTC, so early in the morning.
This is a patch your S kind of heads up?
Yeah. So on the first Tuesday of March, there will be a OpenSSL advisory. At least one of the problems that's fixed is listed as high severity.
Okay. There you go. How about, so that's a little heavy. How about something to lighten the mood? How about a fiber story? Google is lighting up dark fiber all over the place. For years, San Francisco has had a robust fiber optic infrastructure, but it just sits there. Dark, dormant. Google announced Wednesday that it's going to start lighting it up. And here's something that's kind of neat I discovered about this. It doesn't have an exclusive right to this fiber like it has in some places.
Right. It's dark fiber means somebody else owns it and has the capacity and is willing to sell it to you if you want money.
Which
if
means
you want to pay them.
Other businesses could come along, use the same fiber, and compete with Google in the area.
Well, normally they call it dark fiber. There's many fibers, so you could run a second one beside Google. You could rent, but obviously Google basically has a lease on it, so they're not going to. Although the downside is that the person leasing, if someone else is willing to pay more, the other company could pull the lease out from under you when it expires. So if you lease it for 2 years and then somebody else at the end of the 2 years, somebody else is willing to pay a lot more than you were, then you could end up with no fiber anymore.
Yeesh! But, yikes!
My dark fiber comes up this week.
What?
A 10 gigabit wavelength.
Alan, shut your face! You're getting a 10 gigabit connection.
Not to my house.
Oh, okay, good. Because
I could to my house, but it was too expensive.
I was about to table flip right here on the show. I can't handle it. It's too much, Alan.
No, this is only going about 2 blocks from the big data center to a secondary site that where power and space are much cheaper than in the data center.
Oh, nice. Good find.
Yes.
All right. ASUS has settled FTC charges and a 20-year supervision.
Yes. So I'm not sure how this came about and how ASUS is the only one getting it, but the Federal Trade Commission was basically suing ASUS over security vulnerabilities and negligent practices related to ASUS's routers and accompanying services. So because of ASUS routers had a firmware update tool, and they told you there were no updates when there actually was a critical update.
Okay.
And they had ones where they offered you this like cloud file storage service, but other people could break in and steal your files and a bunch of things like that. All the typical stuff we see with routers and why we don't recommend you use an off-the-shelf router and instead get a pfSense or something. So as part of the settlement, which is there as a PDF, ASUS has agreed that for the next 20 years, their firmwares will be audited by an independent auditor before they ship it.
Wow.
So
I wonder who that auditor is going to be.
Doesn't really say. I'm guessing anybody ASUS pays, which might water it down a little bit. But, in the end, we might see all of a sudden ASUS's routers being of higher caliber than everybody else's because they're being audited.
Maybe.
And then we might see some other companies submit to voluntary audits, or maybe the FTC going after a bunch more people for making bad routers.
I wonder if this is laying the groundwork for supervision of Internet of Things type devices.
Well, yes. What I would like to see is the FTC go after my smart TVs where they just pull the rug out from under you and stop supporting it entirely.
Yeah.
Or Noah's fridge.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Yes.
How is Noah's fridge allowed to not get updated like that?
I love poking about that. All right, Alan, have you heard about this? Remember this, like you do, I'm sure you did hear about this. It was sort of implied that Carnegie Mellon might have been used by maybe the FBI or some other agency to break Tor in some way. But it was all hearsay. Well, a federal judge in Washington has now confirmed what has been suspected. Carnegie Mellon University was hired, their software engineering institute was hired by the federal government to do research into breaking Tor in 2014. The judge also made a notable statement in the court filing saying Tor users clearly lack a reasonable expectation of privacy in their IP address while using the Tor network. Some of the details that Tor alleged previously seem to be wrong, though. The research was funded by the Department of Defense, not the FBI.
Well, do you know what's interesting? Do you know who paid for Tor in the first place?
I thought it was the Department of Defense.
Yes.
And then...
So it makes sense that they would pay someone to figure out if there's any problems with it so they can fix them.
Here's the fun trick they did. So the Department of Defense pays them to do this research, and then once the Department of Defense is paid for this research, the FBI is now able to subpoena that research, use it, and break it. So it was a beautiful move. And we have everything else written up. But one more thing. The Revelation, which was first reported by Vice, came out as part of an ongoing criminal case against Brian Farrell, which is one of the Silk Road 2.0 top admins. This research enabled investigators to find him on Tor. He was arrested over a year ago in Washington State. His trial is scheduled for April 25th, coming up right here in Seattle. All right, Alan, moving on. Next story in the roundup. Have we talked about the Mint?
Nope. It happened only a couple days ago.
All right, well, here's our opportunity. Tell me your thoughts, sir.
Right. So Linux Mint, one of the Linux distributions, had their site hacked, and the URLs to their ISOs replaced with different URLs that downloaded ISO that had malware in it. And mostly, that was a thing that we cover on TechSNAP normally. It's mostly I wanted to cover it to talk about, on their website, they post the MD5 hashes. I think in this particular attack, the MD5 hashes weren't replaced, so it's just most people didn't bother to check. But it basically shows the problem with using an MD5 hash posted on your website, because when they hacked in and changed the URLs, they can just change the MD5 hashes to match the bad stuff you download.
Exactly. And
this is why what you basically have to do is have GPG signatures, and that way. Yeah. You can prove that the file was signed by a key that you've got some other way. So the way we do it in FreeBSD is on top of using SHA-256 instead of MD5 because it's harder to spoof. As part of the release of each version, the release engineer sends out an announcement email that's GPG signed with the release engineer's key. And this allows people to verify that those SHA-256 checksums actually came from the real release engineer. Yeah,
Mint's taken a serious bruising in the PR department on this. People are really eating them up for this. And
well, basically, this isn't specific to Linux Mint.
I agree.
A lot of distros just, it's like, oh, right, we just post the MD5 like everybody else. It's like, well, if you don't understand how it works, it's not quite good enough.
But I feel like the bigger problem, too, is really no end users checking that stuff.
Exactly. In OpenBSD, they have a thing called Signify.
Yeah.
And actually, when you buy the CDs,
yeah,
the signature is printed on the label.
Awesome.
And you can use that to verify it.
I was trying to think of a way to automate that process for end users, but I can't. I don't
well, the problem is that the malware version of it could kind of... Basically, you'd have to replace users manually downloading ISO with some automated process.
You'd have to have a downloader that could check something and then you wouldn't want to have it be something centralized that could be compromised, because then you just compromise that centralized point. So now you're talking about a blockchain-based ISO identification service using a specialized downloader with distributed torrents. I know. I don't know, Alan.
Right. That's why we have GPG. Yeah. Right. And we have keys. And it's like, yes, this is the real FreeBSD release engineer. And it's a role-based key, and there's a couple people that have access and nobody else does, and they sign this email with all the regular SHA-256s in it.
Yeah.
And you can use those to verify easily yourself.
I feel like our next story in the roundup is literally a scene out of like a television series or a movie where like a couple of robbers break into a house and they bring the smart hacker kid and he or she disables the home alarm system in seconds. That's kind of what this next story reminds me of, Alan.
Yep.
That's kind of it. This is specifically a wireless home system, which kind of makes that probably a bit easier of a task.
Well, yeah. So basically, the various bits of the system are wireless, so that you don't have to, punch holes in your walls to run the cables to connect the motion sensors and the window.
These have been out for years and years and years and years.
And lots of people pay for them. And it turns out that they can easily be turned off remotely, which kind of defeats the entire purpose.
Coming out of IO Active, which is a Seattle-based security firm, they published proof of concept report on Wednesday that outlines how they disarm SimpliSafe's wireless home security system. According to IO Active, they were able to eavesdrop on wireless transmissions between the components and capture PIN entries used to unlock the security system.
So they weren't using SSL or something between the components, and so they were able to, what sounds like in clear text, see the owner typing in their PIN number to unlock it.
Looks like
and
what they
just replay that later.
Smart. So they spent 250 bones. They got themselves a couple of SimpliSafe components online, and then they hooked up to a microcontroller, and the rest is probably pretty obvious. Huh. They say it listens on a 433 megahertz radio transmissions frequency.
And the replies come in at 315 megahertz.
Yeah. See, it's just like in the Hollywood stories there, Alan. Okay, we got a post here from Dan. How do you say it? Kaminsky. Tell me about this.
Yes. So Dan Kaminsky's a very famous security researcher guy, and he basically has some thoughts on why the glibc thing we talked about last week is much, much worse than we ever thought.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Much wider spread?
Yeah. And basically, it can dig down in there a lot worse than you thought. Like, most people didn't realize that sudo is vulnerable because it checks host names on machines.
So DNS lookups.
Yeah. They're basically in everything.
Yeah, that is.
Even things you didn't think of.
Huh. Okay. You want to end the roundup on a rumor? Seems like something we don't normally do, but this one I like. We don't normally cover rumors at all, but I don't know. This could happen. Rumor going around, according to the Register, that IBM wants to buy Bruce Schneier's Resilient company for $100 million. Bruce Schneier working for IBM. Could you see it, Alan? What do you think?
I don't know much about the company in this case, the Resilient or whatever, but 100 million seems kind of low for an acquisition for a place that Bruce Schneier works. Yeah,
I think that's the house that he does his like consulting security research under.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, by the way, according to persons with knowledge of the matter. So it's got to be true. All right. Well, so like we mentioned a bazillion times this week, we will be live at a special time next week at 11 a.m. Pacific. Which, Alan, do you know the math there for that one?
Well, those times aren't going to be right because we're doing a double, right? So we start early?
Well, we start at 11 a.m. Pacific. We normally start at 1 p.m. Pacific.
Ah, okay. So how much early are we starting? 2?
Yeah, right. So we normally start at 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 2 p.m. Eastern, which is 1900 UTC.
Yeah. And of course, it doesn't really matter because all over jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. Yes. That's really the thing. That's the thing.
And then the daylight saving times will start screwing with stuff. But if I'm not mistaken, not until after.
We'll get back,
Well, we'll actually miss a chunk of it.
Yeah.
We'll at least miss one of the 2 weeks of the U.S. and Canada have jumped before the rest of the world because George Bush is a...
Yeah. Screws with last. Super bad. Hate it. Anyways, I could do a whole show on that. jupiterbroadcasting.com/contact for the emails, techsnap.reddit.com to submit content to the show, and jblive.tv is where you watch it live. And don't forget, we also have RSS feeds. You subscribe, and you get TechSnap automatically every single week. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for tuning in this week's episode of TechSnap, and we'll see you right back here next week.